bit of context about my uh, my work in San Antonio as it relates to food, and then I have a small presentation to show you guys as well. Um, so I came to San Antonio about 15 years ago to go to Trinity University, and I was actually recruited to be on their debate team, but quickly learning about federal policy and other issues, I decided that I was very concerned about the food system and especially how we were going to be able to produce food for the next 100 years or so, considering environmental challenges and growing populations and a lot of different things that are affecting especially agriculture, but also the distribution of food. So I quit my debate team and I started farming, and I farmed in a lot of different places. I farmed in Kentucky, Costa Rica, Massachusetts, Arizona, and after I graduated, I started a hydroponic farm here in downtown San Antonio. And that company is called LocalSprout. It still is farming. We just celebrated our 10-year anniversary in August. But it also became a facility for food manufacturers to be able to produce their goods, and a food truck commissary. So we call it now a food hub, and it serves as an intermediary space for producers like ranchers and farmers to be able to store their crops and stuff before they go out to restaurants and wholesale. It's also a place for producers to manufacture roasted coffee or jellies or jams and sauerkrauts and it's a bakery. So it's all sorts of places that food becomes processed or becomes a value added product. Uh, it was mentioned that I've worked with the Food Policy Council for a long time. That was what I was primarily asked to talk with you about. So that's what some of my presentation is about. I was president for 7 years at the Food Policy Council, and I actually stepped down. I think last August or so. Uh, and so now I'm treasurer and I'm on the board still as well. But we have a new president, Jamie González, as well, who's doing a terrific job. And then my other role is as director of food sustainability for the San Antonio Food Bank, and that's what I'm up to most of the time. The food bank does a lot of different types of work. We distribute about 80 million pounds of food, not just to the San Antonio city, but also to about 29 counties in South Texas. Something that I'm really proud about is that 15 million of that 80 million is fresh produce, and we're working really hard on nutrition and trying to make sure that the clients that work directly with the food bank are getting a balanced diet. The food bank does a lot of other work that I think is a little bit more structural in terms of trying to get people to have a fulfilling and economically vibrant life. So there are job training programs that the food bank participates in to help lots of different individuals get culinary skills or warehouse skills to be able uh, to find new positions and hopefully grow their income and be able to grow their lives in meaningful ways. And something that's really exciting about that job training program is that it also works with actively incarcerated people. So in the last year of a sentence for nonviolent crimes, certain prisons within the area are able to work with the food bank to get their currently incarcerated people access to some of those culinary warehouse skills, so that when they leave prison, they have the opportunity to gain meaningful employment. We also get folks a lot of different food stamp access and access to Medicaid. And to me, that's a really important thing, that our food bank is not just working with individual people to distribute food, but they're also working to try to improve their economic position so that they don't necessarily have to use the food bank in the future. That's a program or that's a strategy that the food bank calls trying to shorten the line. But my direct work is actually not in any of those pieces of the food bank. Instead, I'm the head farmer. And so the food bank has 75 acres of land that we're able to actively cultivate. We try to utilize sustainable practices to grow as much produce to push into the food bank's work as possible. And so I get to demonstrate agriculture on a couple different sites. One of those sites is at the food bank itself. There's about 25 acres there. But 50 acres of where I'm cultivating is at Mission San Juan at the National Park site here in town. And we actually use the same acequia that was used by the Spanish colonists almost 300 years ago in order to be able to irrigate those crops. So we have peach orchard. We are about to plant a fig orchard in March. And I have lots of different crops out there right now: cabbage, broccoli, radishes, turnips, beets. Obviously, the last couple of days has been a little bit stressful for a lot of farmers, myself included. But we have a lot of resilient crops, and going out there this morning in the freeze, I was reminded just how resilient the food system is for us. While my little cabbage plants were standing as a bulwark against the cold. So I'd love to answer questions afterwards about any of those things, about hydroponic farming, about food manufacturing, about ranchers, about the food bank. But I have a little information to give about the Food Policy Council, which is what I was asked to talk about a little bit today. So the Food Policy Council of San Antonio is a nonprofit, like the food bank, like Gardopia Gardens, which is another partner organization of ours. We have no paid employees, except we just hired a part-time worker to help on a food forest initiative that I'll mention in a little bit. But the entire board is volunteer. We've been volunteer the whole time, and that's been a really nice thing, that there's no active conflicts of interest. We're not trying to build an administrative group. We're not trying to put on a ton of different programming. Mostly the goal of the Food Policy Council is to advocate, and to advocate for a healthy, fresh, affordable food access for all in a vibrant local food economy. And primarily we've worked with the municipality. We've also worked with the county, and to a lesser degree the state. And sometimes we'll make recommendations as well to Congress people for federal policy, but we really try to stay grounded in the local food system, and especially the way that local policy affects the food system. So a little bit of history. Hold on one second here. There we go. So we've worked on a lot of different small pieces within the food system over the last several years. The organization was founded in 2011. It was connected to a grant that was given to our Metro Health Department. But eventually it spun off into this independent nonprofit. So we get to advocate without necessarily having to worry about the direct reactions of what individual policymakers or departments are looking for. In that time, we have increased the number of chickens you can have in your backyard from 3 to 8. Now, if you have a flock size of 8, you don't need any special use permit. And if you want more, there's relatively easy ways to do that. We worked on zoning questions. There was a big set of issues that we as urban farmers were seeing in terms of which zoning districts within the city it was allowed to have cultivation in. As a result of our work, there's now no special use permit for any district within the city to be able to cultivate an urban farm, or what we designated as a residential market garden, which is just growing food at your house to sell. We worked with a number of school districts and school administrators to try to get more access to locally grown food into the cafeterias through the farm to school program. And we actually held a conference a couple years back that included the commissioner for agriculture here in Texas, and we tried to connect a lot of different farmers with schools. There's some of those programs that are still operating. We created something called a Healthy Corner Store initiative to try to combat food insecurity in low-income neighborhoods. And we did that by having the city subsidize the wholesale purchase of produce for convenience stores to be able to purchase healthier ingredients. We also funded coolers for them to be able to store and display that produce. And we've seen that program be really successful. In 2019, that started as about 8 stores in the southeast side of the city. And now it's in over 30 stores in every district in the city. And it moves over 7 tons of produce every month. We particularly like convenience stores as a way to combat food insecurity because they are very convenient. some of the food insecurity work that a lot of folks focus on, whether those are gardens or farmers markets, we think, while very admirable, can be a little bit inconvenient for folks that really don't have easy access to healthy foods. And so we really like convenience stores as a way to be able to push that food out in a way that is readily accessible to a single parent of two who's working multiple jobs, to make it as easy as possible. Uh, so we've worked on a number of different things. There's certain programs that we've really attempted that we haven't had that much success with, trying to decrease food waste throughout the city, trying to increase diversion channels or composting operations. We haven't had a lot of success there, for example. We have tried to work with some immigrant rights, particularly agricultural workers, labor organizations, and we haven't made a lot of progress on those. So I just want to be upfront about, we are definitely getting some things done. There's a lot of things that we haven't necessarily been able to get done. But also I want to talk especially about a newer program that we're working on. And we really, I think, crunched numbers pretty hard in a way that no other city in the country has been able to do. And that is to recognize the benefits of urban agriculture throughout the city, not just in terms of food, but also in terms of what we call environmental services. So for a little bit of context on this project, we worked with a group out of Stanford called the Natural Capital Project. They don't normally work with cities. They normally work with federal governments of other countries, trying to quantify how valuable green infrastructure is for the citizens. And when I say green infrastructure, I mean, what is the monetary value of a swamp or a forest or a lake or a coastline? A lot of the time when policy decision makers are trying to look at whether or not to preserve one land use versus another, they have to break things down into numbers just to be able to compare, well, how valuable is this for a population? And we were hoping that they would be able to work with us to be able to quantify the value of agriculture in a city. And we think that this research will be able to be used in other cities throughout the country. So when we approached this study, a question that we asked was, well, how much food can be produced from these types of urban agriculture? What types of co-benefits might we expect from those? Who would get access to those benefits? And then if we were to invest, then how would we do that to improve the equity of especially low income and historically marginalized peoples in San Antonio? And here's what we found. We looked at 16,000 acres of publicly owned land. This study is only about land that is owned by the city and the utilities. If we were to convert all of that land to agriculture, what would that look like? And we looked at two different examples of types of agriculture. One is what we call food forests. These are all perennial crops, and I'll explain a little bit more about that in a minute. And then the other one is urban farms, which is a little bit more of a traditional production that you would think about. And if we did that, and 16,000 acres is a lot to convert. We don't have enough farmers to do that. Some of that land is being used for a lot of other really useful stuff right now. Some of that is public parks. We wouldn't want to convert all of it, but just as a thought experiment, if we did, what would we get out of the agriculture that happened on those places? We found that you could grow about 192 million pounds of food per year from food forests, which is enough to feed 314,000 households. And that number of households is derived from what the USDA thinks in terms of what the daily intake of fruits and vegetables should be for a family. And if that was urban farms, we found, far more food, 926 million pounds, almost 1 billion pounds of food per year, which is enough to feed over 1 million households, which comes pretty close to be able to supplement almost the entire city. Now, again, this is a thought experiment. 16,000 acres of conversion to farm within the city, that's a lot. But it does tell us just what the potential is. And with a food forest, this is how we're thinking about it. Wanted to try to make our numbers relatively specific. And so we thought about just a food forest with 4 crops that we know grow extremely well in this region: mulberries, pecans, figs, and nopales. And these crops might seem really random, but another initiative of the Food Policy Council that I've been working closely on for quite a long time is a food forest that we started on a county park in 2022. These 4 crops we found did extraordinarily well through the freezes, through the extreme heat that we've been experiencing. And so these crops weren't picked just from nothing. They were picked from my experience on the ground of what was growing really quite well. And a food forest ideally would have a lot more complexity, a lot more diversity, but just for modeling purposes, these were the 4 crops that we looked at to try to figure out, okay, well, how much could you really grow? And now we know food forests aren't quite as productive as commercial orchards, so we took a little discount. And at 75% of what commercial orchards get, these are the numbers that we're thinking about per quarter acre per year. So total, I hope you guys are in the mood for nopales. You can grow, and I won't read out all the numbers, but you can grow, millions of pounds of each of these if they were grown at mass at all of that publicly owned land.
And Mitch, a question, like for the figs and the pecans, like how many years do they take to like mature and produce fruit?
Yeah, great question. Mulberries and so all 4 of these take a while to produce. These presume mature numbers. I'll say from my experience, you start to get a mature yield from nopales, figs, and mulberries after about 3 or 4 years. For pecans, it's a little bit longer. You start to get a mature yield around year 6, and then you can kind of account for its full production in year 8 or 9 or so. And then they can live for a long time. So pecans, for example, can live over 100 years. Figs can also live for over 100 years. Nopal will kind of seed themselves. So once established, the intent is that they will continue to produce for quite a while. Urban farms, the data here is a little bit more finicky, and I have been involved in farming in urban context for a long time, but my experiences alone aren't enough to, I think, base these models off of. So we looked at about 200 studies of what crop yields from urban farms look like throughout the country, but those weren't regional necessarily. Those looked at a lot of different places, not just in the United States, but internationally in urban context. Then we looked at 2 really good studies from what we thought were a little bit more applicable climates from LSU and Rutgers, to those really good studies. And then there's an urban farm in town called Garcia Street Urban Farm, which is on the east side. And we looked at their harvest data for the last several years as well. We averaged those out, and that's where the numbers for these urban farm estimates come from. Again, we didn't want to look at every single crop in the world, so we just looked at 8. Those were eggplant, cabbage, potatoes, onions, tomatoes, summer squash, radishes, and lettuce. And one little caveat here about how people think about the food system in general, that I think we should all think about a little bit when we hear these numbers. A lot of people think about pounds, and pounds is the numbers that I'm using here. At the food bank, pounds is also the metric that they're thinking about in terms of how much are they getting to the community. But we know that a pound of potatoes is not equally valuable in terms of nutrition to a pound of lettuce. Now, I don't, if anyone has advice for what a better metric is to think about, just a unit of nutrition to a family, I'm all ears. I think we all in the food system are trying to think through those things. but just bear in mind, lettuce, cabbage, these are not 100% the same. They're not equally nutritionally relevant, but poundage is just kind of the best that we got at the moment to be able to think about it. So the numbers on here show a little bit what that distribution of total poundage yield is over time. And this presumes that if 1 acre was used just for 1 crop, then what would that be able to yield? It doesn't presume that you're planting a cabbage and an eggplant at the same spot. It presumes every time you can plant a cabbage, and for cabbages, that's about 2 harvests a year. It presumes that you are doing that. So just give you a little bit of illustration there. So that's the city, the entire city. I wanted to go a little bit deeper into one district, and there's a huge amount of data if you guys are ever curious about this, but District 3, I think, has the biggest opportunity. This is coincidentally where I'm farming at Mission San Juan today in the southeast portion of the city. And we find that there's a huge area that can be cultivated within District 3. And also it happens to coalesce with lower income neighborhoods. So we think that there's a real big opportunity for low income neighborhoods to be able to have locally produced crops in these regions. So we found that there's about 4,000 acres or so of publicly owned, undeveloped green space in that region. And also a lot of folks within that district use food stamps. And so we thought, okay, there's high demand for healthy produce, but we also know that there's a high potential supply because we know that we can grow a lot of food in this region. So these are the citywide numbers again. We want to just show, in addition to food yield, and that's nutrition savings, but it's also cost savings. These analysts looked closely at what other effects would this space have. So heat is a really large challenge for us in the city through the summertime. We know that there's greater incidence of heat stroke. We know that there's chronic disease that happens as a result of really high temperatures. So urban cooling is a really large benefit. And we're very curious, okay, how much of an overlap is there between being able to use urban agriculture to produce food, but also to provide these other benefits. We found that food forests really do a great job. You think about these big pecan trees, think about wide mulberry trees, fig trees with these, you know, really broad leaves, being able to cool the environment, because as the sun hits them, they're actually transpiring and letting that heat out through water vapor, so cooling and providing shade. We found urban farms provide less of that. Obviously, they don't have the same canopy size as a pecan tree, but you know, there's some real green space for a tomato or an eggplant. We also, away from urban cooling, we think about climate change mitigation. So how much carbon can be stored in the trunks of these trees? We found that food forests provide a bunch of carbon sequestration, whereas urban farms do not, because they're annual crops. And also potentially, if they were publicly accessible, food forests, then you could increase the amount of green space access for recreation for the public. Whereas if it's an urban farm, we kind of envision that urban farm is not always accessible to the public, because you don't, I'll say this as a farmer, I love the public, but I don't always love them walking down my tomato crops because when a ripe one is there, they're unlikely to leave it for me. So we think that if a lot of space was converted to urban farming, then it would actually decrease green space. I had hoped that the modeling would show that there was a real impact in flood mitigation, so how much water was retained from these different land uses. And the modeling didn't really bear that out. It said, well, you know, it doesn't really affect water retention or flooding that much, which, oh, great. You know, this is why we asked the scientists. And then I was also curious about if there would be any runoff. And these numbers are a little bit more suspect because they presume a lot of compost or a lot of nitrogen is being applied as fertilizer to these systems, which isn't necessarily true. But if there was a lot of fertilizer, then it could also cause some extra runoff, which would not necessarily be great for the river. So just a couple things to keep in mind here is this study compared the current baseline to an expansion of where urban agriculture is. And I mentioned a couple of the assumptions that this modeling had built in. There are other assumptions that you can kind of dive into if you want to ever get into the data. And these were the policy recommendations. So when Stanford finished this analysis, we brought them in. We actually presented our findings to City Council in May of 2023. We found that some mixture of urban farms and food forests would provide a really good portfolio. And that there would be some benefits for food insecurity, but also for heat. And especially if you could grow in places where there's food insecurity, those are also places that struggle a lot with really high heating temperatures. And so we recommended we should have a couple more food forest sites. We should fund at least 3 urban farm sites. And we should create a library of tools for people who want to start urban agriculture initiatives throughout the city to be able to use those tools for free. And City Council agreed with us. They actually they funded $60,000 worth of seed funding for urban farms through the Food Policy Council to be able to start, and that'll be starting here in 2024. And so we're actively deciding on what those sites will be, and then there will be a public application process for farmers to say, hey, I want access to this land to be able to farm, and then we'll review those applications and ultimately award them to certain applicants and give them $20,000 to start urban farming initiatives. So I've worked in urban farming contexts in a bunch of different places in San Antonio. Hydroponics is an indoor system with lights. You know, I've farmed and gardened all over the city, but especially now through the food banks work. I'm really proud of what urban agriculture can do. I'm proud of how the Food Policy Council has influenced the growth of this kind of regrowing industry, because we know agriculture was a really big, important part of the history of San Antonio. I think it can be again. And we're really hopeful about what this can end up looking like in the future. There's a lot of obstacles. A lot of people have to be trained as farmers. Farming is not easy. It's not getting any easier. Climate change means that the summers are really intense, but also means that when we get freezes, they're hard and harsh. It's my opinion that certain crops that we used to grow are not going to be as applicable in the future. I have a 5-acre peach orchard, for example. Peaches are very challenging now to grow. I'm more, and I'm about to plant 5 acres of figs, not 5 acres of peaches. That's because I think the summers and the winters that we have now, they are more likely to give us a good fig crop than necessarily a peach crop. So I think the farmers of the future in San Antonio are going to have to think hard about how do we deal with these summers, and how do we really come up with a resilient type of agriculture. But the Food Policy Council is not just worried about agriculture. We're thinking about different ways to facilitate food insecurity work. And in general, it's really nice to be working with a number of different people that are committed to really alleviating hunger in a sustainable way. So I don't know if that's exactly what you guys had in mind, but I would love to answer any questions. I'm sure there's a lot of different things that I forgot to mention.
Mitch, I'm going to just jump in here. Thank you so much. This is really, your whole presentation is just full, I think, of really good information for us. We are going to be looking at our program in April too on this topic. So thanks. The urban forest is new to me, and so I just have a quick personal question about mulberries and their nutrient use. I mean, I can remember as a kid eating mulberries, and I think silkworms eat them. But so tell me a little bit more about the decision to include mulberries.
Yeah, so mulberries, they evolved to be towards riverbank areas within our region. They're actually native to South Texas, and you mentioned a really cool attribute of them, which is that mulberry leaves are the only things that silkworms actually use as their forage to be able to produce silk. That's an industry that's never existed in South Texas, despite us having a number of different mulberries. So it could be an interesting opportunity for folks. But in terms of recipes, mulberries function very, very similarly to raspberries or blackberries. And so they can be used in jams or eaten fresh. They have a really high nutrient compounds for antioxidants. They have a lot of folate and vitamin E and A and D. So they're a really nice supplement. I'll say birds really love them. So if you're going to get a really good yield off your mulberries, you might have to figure out a scarecrow or a BB gun or some other way to be able to retain your mulberries. But I love them in particular because they grow extremely quickly. And so I have an ambitious project for the food bank that I'm planning on embarking on within the next year or so, to plant about 7 acres of mulberries on site at the food bank itself. And the intent is not to just get those berries, but also because they grow so quickly, I think they can provide a great shade environment for chickens. And so we're going to have chicken coops that can rotate through those 7 acres, shaded by the mulberries, and also being with the chickens able to forage those berries occasionally when they yield, and being able to fertilize the trees as they produce more nitrogen through their droppings over time. So there's a lot of interesting relationships, I think, that can be had between different crops and animals. We call that silvopasture in sustainable agriculture context. But mulberries are really interesting because they evolved to this region. If you give them access to water, they grow extremely quickly. They provide these really broad leaves, and I've seen, as trees, they can grow faster than pretty much any other edible tree that I've seen in the city. So I really like them as a tree.
Thanks so much.
I guess just a couple of things that strike me too is like, okay, with the food policies, like groups, I mean, are they around like all of Texas? Do y'all share your information? You know, you were saying you work with Stanford. I mean, you know, like when I go to the farmer's market, I consider myself like a gardener because both sides of my family were farmers. And, you know, they tell me too that like, when they're rethinking like how we grow like tomatoes because there's so much that you know, it used to always be full sun. Well, now with, you know, 107 degrees, we can't have full sun. So what do? You know, just different things like this. So, you know, does that Stanford project look at things like that? Do you look at things like that? Like, how do we adapt? I think because I mean, things are changing and we don't know like if last year being the hottest year ever is going to continue forward or not. I mean, you know, we're in this changing pattern.
Yeah. So your first question was if we work with other food policy councils, and the answer is yes. Although in Texas they look a little bit different. So we are an independent nonprofit. In Austin, their food policy group is actually an advisory group to the city council. So it's within the government, which has pros and cons. So they have a little bit more direct access to city council people, but those city council people also appoint people that are on that board or group, and so they're not necessarily community activists. They're like appointees, and so it can be a little bit more watered down. We have a little more independence. They have maybe a little more direct influence. So there's pros and cons. In Houston, there's actually not a nonprofit, but there is just a group. It's a little bit more informal. And in Dallas, it's actually connected to their food bank. So this is not super quantified, but I think that this holds true from my research. In the early 2000s, there was a really big movement for community gardening. All of a sudden, there was a big enthusiasm for raised bed gardens in particular, but a lot of people, there was a lot of agriculture, you know, prior to the 60s or so throughout the United States. Agriculture was not like a really sexy, cool, new, exciting. It was just a thing everybody had around them for the most part. And then the 60s through the 2000s or so, agriculture dropped off as efficiencies continued to increase for farmers to be able to produce cheaper and cheaper crops at scale as big farms were consolidating in rural areas. So in the early 2000s, there seemed to be a movement for community gardens to rise again. And that has continued. By the 2010s, early 2010s, there was kind of a national movement for this food policy council notion. And food policy councils popped up all around the country. But a lot of them didn't really last. So more than half of those food policy councils are no longer functioning, and they're not opening as quickly as they did in that time. So the San Antonio Food Policy Council is a little unusual in that our all volunteer group, and no one has ever been paid for this, has continued and continues to get things done. I think we are always looking to talk with other groups in order to try to get more done together. But different cities approach it differently, and there's varying levels of success. One group, more than any other in the country, coordinates those efforts, and that's Johns Hopkins University. They do a lot of public health work that's really impressive. And so they kind of aggregate a lot of research for food policy council work throughout the city, or rather throughout the country. And there's really successful food policy councils, like in Philadelphia has a really impressive one. Atlanta has a really impressive one. Detroit has some impressive work. Seattle has some really impressive stuff. But there's work happening all over the place. It's tough to keep track of all the cities sometimes. When we created the lease documents, for example, for urban farms to use public land, I used open records requests in Colorado, Washington, D.C., New Orleans, and Boston to figure out how those cities are approaching using public land for private urban farm context. But they're all over the place. And then, Susan, your other question was, you know, how do we adapt in the future? And I think that's just going to take a lot of experimentation and a lot of farmers. So we know that you mentioned tomatoes. It turns out tomato pollen melts at the temperature of about 95 or 96 degrees. So when that was an unusual temperature in the summer, great. But it turns out melted pollen is not that great at pollinating. And so now we think about tomatoes as being productive in the spring and the fall rather than the summer. That continues to change, but also I think there's other crops that are really exciting that can handle hugely hot temperatures. Malabar spinach is a leafy green that really can just eat up the heat, loves it. I'm really excited about a crop, amaranth, that it's like quinoa. It's native to northern Mexico. It was actually illegal to cultivate when the Spanish colonists came in initially. So it's a little like unusual that I'll be growing amaranth at Mission San Juan, where I think I would be in pretty big trouble with the missionaries initially if I had done that. But amaranth is really interesting because it can tolerate the heat really well, but it's also extremely nutrient packed. So it has lots of amino acids and proteins and also some other really high quality stuff. So and then there's a lot of lessons I think to draw from the past. Native crops like nopales, like mulberry, but also like agarita or like Texas persimmon or like mesquite. Mesquite beans are really nutritious. These are crops that weren't irrigated in mass prior to colonization, but they're still around and they still have a lot to offer us. And part of that is going to be farmers figuring out how to produce it, but part of it is going to be home cooks figuring out, how do I use this ingredient? How do I integrate it into my diet? Nopales were a huge portion of the Latino diet, prior to the last 50 years or so. And since that time, it's kind of dropped off. I think it's time again to get those recipes back in people's kitchens and making sure that they're able to use it. Nopal in particular has this amazing ability to help regulate blood sugar. And so diabetic populations stand to benefit hugely from nopal. And it just makes a lot of sense because Latino and low income populations have a higher prevalence for diabetes. They also historically used more nopal, and so if we can get that tradition back, that can help make progress in certain chronic disease conditions. So a lot of it's experimentation, and I think a lot of it is listening to the past and thinking about the future. And then I've grown hydroponically indoors with lights for the past 10 years in a profitable context. It's not hugely profitable. Farming rarely is, but certain types of futuristic technologies are also going to play an important role, because I can grow leafy greens like kale, which is normally a winter crop for us. I can grow it through August in a hydroponic environment. So I think thinking about the past and thinking about the future, but all of that is going to be necessary for us to adapt.
Mm-hmm.
I had three questions. One is, when you were comparing, when you said if you converted the land, all say the public land, to food forests, and then you were talking about urban farms. So were you comparing the same amount of land being used for both?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah. So the model looked at both versions as a separate hypothetical. So if we converted all, and this is not all public land, it's all convertible public land, so undeveloped. So it's green space. So it includes all public parks, for example, but it also includes all like land holdings that the city has that aren't parks, that are just green space. So both hypotheticals assume a full conversion. So if we've converted all of that acreage, 16,800 acres, to food forest, we would get 192 million pounds of food. If we converted all those to urban farms and we had the farmers to cultivate it, then we would have almost 1 billion pounds of food.
Mm-hmm.
But then if we grow more trees, you get more cooling. If you have more farms, you don't get as much cooling. So there's pros and cons.
So I was intrigued by getting the produce into convenience stores. And are you able to sell it or at a price that low income people can afford?
So I should distinguish, urban agriculture initiatives are not the same as that healthy corner store initiative. So the answer is yes. We have what we found looking at healthy corner store programs throughout the country is a lot of them prioritize what we thought was the wrong direction. They go to convenience stores and they try to increase the marketing really hard. They're like, they have a bunch of signage outside that says, hey, we have apples and grapefruits or whatever. And then they would have like cooking demonstrations and stuff. And we found okay, we don't really think that low-income populations in San Antonio are unfamiliar with produce. We think they just don't have access to affordable produce. So we instead had the city subsidize a wholesaler selling produce to convenience stores. And then we told the convenience store, hey, you need to make your price low because you bought it for low. And over time, we changed that subsidy. So initially in the program, you know, almost 100% of the produce was paid for by the city. Then, you know, throughout the year, it decreased by 10%, 10%, 10% until about 2 years in, there was no subsidy at all. So we drew it down. And that was to get, we knew that there would be losses of the produce initially while that neighborhood was less familiar with the offerings. And so there would be more product loss. So we thought, okay, let's try to bridge the gap there. But then eventually, if it's a sustainable industry, if there really is demand in the neighborhood, then the government incentive can walk back and let that transaction happen on their own. And we took care of all the capital costs on the front end. Like we bought them the cooler, we got them all set up. And then the other thing we did was we worked with one single wholesaler to be able to distribute to all of these convenience stores. So if you're a convenience store and you're buying 3 cases of produce, you know, every 2 weeks, that's not a lot of money. And so it's kind of hard to justify a single delivery from a warehouse to your store. But if a wholesaler is selling to 40 stores, well, all of a sudden it's 3 cases at each store. Now it makes a lot more sense to just hit all of those at once in a delivery route. And so we found kind of concentrating them was a useful thing. So the prices there are lower than what you can find at HEB, at least at the beginning of the program when they're being subsidized. And then ultimately we kind of take our hands off and are like, okay, now it's up to the store owner to decide what that price is. If they want to keep selling produce, then they'll do so. And we found was, yeah, they're going to make a little money off of the program, but convenience store owners are embedded in the neighborhood. They care about the people that they're working with. So if kids are coming in and they're buying Takis and Reese's and their fathers are buying 40s and their mothers are buying Pepsis every day, they're watching what's happening to the health of that neighborhood. They want to sell produce. It's just they're going to lose money if they do it all at once. And so we're trying to help them do that. But once it gets in, and not every store has succeeded, some of them have not, but the majority have. And I attribute that to the store owners want to be selling healthier stuff. They don't just want to be selling totally processed, not very good foods or sugar sweetened beverages. They want to include apples and avocados and cabbages. And so I think that's really why the program is successful.
So my last question is, I'm trying to reduce food waste at home, and also I've started composting. Can you pinpoint what some of the obstacles are to making those programs larger in San Antonio?
Yeah, and home composting and there's a lot of great resources. It's nice that we have a green bin program now that residences can use. You know, if you don't want to compost in the traditional way, you can use worms. You can use what are called black soldier fly larvae to be able to produce chicken feed and different. So there's a lot of different ways that you can approach it. On a citywide scale, it's just going to cost a lot of money. Is the short answer? There is no green bin program for businesses, so restaurants have no opportunity. There's no public program to help restaurants or any other food organization compost or reduce their waste that way. I'll say at the food bank, they're very, very interested in trying to divert as much food into people's hands as possible. But the logistics of getting, 4 trays of high quality food from a restaurant at the end of the night, refrigerate that effectively, and then distribute it to, neighbors, it's just not an efficient process to be able to do it. The one exception that the food bank has found is soups, because you can just freeze soups whole and then you're good to go. But anything that can't just be frozen and retain its same quality, it's really, really hard to be able to redistribute those efficiently. And so then that's just the food bank. On a citywide scale, presume you can't divert the food into people's mouths, which is really where you want it to go. It has to go into composting. It requires huge equipment. It requires huge logistics. It requires lots and lots of fuel, which keeps on being a big sticking point to be able to move that from place to place. And so it all just, for the most part, goes to the solid waste department right now. Right? So it's very possible. It's just very expensive.
Hmm.
Mitch, thank you for sharing with us today. Your presentation was very informative, but I have one question. How do you get more farmers involved? You know, you mentioned at different times in your talk that the lack of farmers. How, you know, is there any initiative to try to get individuals or current farmers to expand what they're doing?
There's a lot of programs from the USDA to help beginning farmers get access to land, help them with I was just looking at crop insurance programs the other day because the freeze was scaring me so much, and I was reminded that there's a lot of programs specifically for starting farmers to mitigate their risk through insurance programs. So there's some federal resources available. There's county extension resources available. In Texas, we have probably the most ambitious extension office program in the country. Most extension offices are funded directly by the state at a 1-to-1 ratio. Ours is a 3-to-1 ratio. So there's more funding for Texas AgriLife and Texas A&M's extension office than there are elsewhere. So there's a lot of resources available for advice. There are not as many training programs as I think we probably should have. I think as a city and as a state, there should be more. But there are some. I would be remiss not to mention, if you are a veteran and you want to get into farming, there's a lot of resources available. There's a program called Battleground to Breaking Ground. That's a wonderful intro program. But farming is tough. There's no training program that can get you everything you need. You need your own land. You need to know where you're going to market the crop. Growing things is one thing. Selling them at a profit is another. It's a tall order, and a lot of the lessons that pretty much all the lessons that I've got didn't come from a public program. They just came from mistakes and luck and grit. So there's farmers out there, but we could use more help training them up and getting them the resources they need to really get up on their feet.
Again, thank you, Mitch. Your passion shows through in your presentation, and we thank you for being with us today.
Well, thank you so much. If any of you would ever like a tour of the food banks farm, feel free to reach out to me, or if you want to learn more about any of the other initiatives that I mentioned, LocalSprout or the Food Policy Council, then feel free to just send me an email.
Thank you so much. We'll keep that in mind, Mitch.
Okay.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Okay.
Thank you.
I see that Dr. Ricardo González has joined us for the next presentation. Dr. González is the director of the Etling Center for Civic Leadership and Sustainability at UIW, University of Incarnate Word. I welcome you, Dr. González.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you. And it was great hearing the portion of what Mitch was talking about with the San Antonio Food Bank and food. And I'm here to talk to you all about our food pantry here that we have at the University of the Incarnate Word. I believe, do I have share screen capability, Patricia?
I'll give it to you.
Thank you.
Just a second. So.
Can you all see the screen now?
Yes.
Great. So we here at the University of the Incarnate Word, like most universities in San Antonio and actually throughout the entire nation, have a food pantry. Kind of interesting of what Mitch was talking about when you saw an increase in community gardens back in the early 2000s. Well, or ironically, around 2010, around that time, you saw an increase in food pantries at colleges and universities. So we actually started ours really with the perspective of, here we go. We are, of course, at the University of the Incarnate Word. We're our focus, the Etling Center. By the way, the Etling Center is named after Sister Dorothy Dot Etling,
Yes.
who is a former sister. She passed, but Sister of Charity of the Incarnate Word. And Sister Dot wanted to make sure that we were doing things to really engage our students to become global leaders and to become really aware of social justices and injustices. Well, one thing that we did here at the University of the Incarnate Word, falling in alignment with the UN's 17 sustainability goals, is we focused on one thing that we learned from our students is there was a need for a pantry. So this was a need coming directly from our students. They noted that they needed food. It's not that they, well, in essence, they could not afford food, right? That they were going hungry at some time during the academic year. So in association with our Student Government Association, a few other departments on campus, as well as St. Vincent de Paul of San Antonio. Actually, we couldn't have got this off the ground without St. Vincent de Paul of San Antonio Society. What they did is they actually brought onto our campus an 18-wheeler truck. And on that 18-wheeler truck, we would use the back of the truck to disperse items as a mobile food pantry. Because we needed to see if there truly was a need and how big that need was on campus. So we were putting that 18-wheeler on campus twice a week. And as you can see from the information, we were getting over 150 members and 8,000 pounds of food. Not only was coming, were we distributing, but we also have a generous community, and we still have a generous community that we have about the same amount of food that we distribute out that we also get in. So many of our campus community donate our students, our faculty and staff to the needs of our community. So what is the needs, right? When we first started this, prior to COVID, by the way, this was started back in 2018, we were getting about 30 to 40 community members each week. And community members include not just our campus community, but the community as a whole. So we are now in association and in alignment with the San Antonio Food Bank. We are one of their satellite locations as well. But we are now growing to about 60 members after COVID that are utilizing the service on campus. And as you can see from what I listed here, the main needs are really grab-and-go items, ramen noodles, peanut butter, mac and cheese bowls, things that can be consumed quickly, right? The other thing that we learned, which I thought was interesting, is we would start buying can openers, because you start thinking, well, wait a minute, people that are food insecure or who don't have shelter, they don't have utensils, right? So we also have, we also encourage our campus community to donate the to-go. Many of you may get items to go from Chili's or from your local dining area when you go out to eat, and they'll put the plastic utensils in the bag, right? Well, we recycle those utensils to our people in the food community, in our food pantry. So we are able to get plastic utensils to them because many times they don't have utensils available for them. So who are the people utilizing our community, our pantry? So we know about 95%, at least for us at the University of the Incarnate Word, 95% of our shoppers and customers, they're associated with UIW in some form or fashion, right? They're a student, they're a faculty, they're family of students. They may be contracted employees. And what I mean by contracted employees, our landscaping, our food services are contracted employees. So about 95% of the people shopping are really part of our campus environment. What we've also learned is over 25% of them are veterans, and over 50% of them are showing that they are supporting a family of 3 people or more. So it's not just themselves, and it's not really just a student, right? When you think of, oh, it's a food pantry on a university campus, well, then it's just for the students. No, the students are actually about, here at UIW, we have about 13,000 students on our campus. Well, as part of the campus community, we have about 3,000 that reside on campus. So about 10,000 are commuter students, and roughly a large portion of those that are needing support are our commuters, right? So again, it's identifying who is our need. We also did a survey on campus to identify what truly is the food insecurity percentage of our campus, and we identified it at roughly 35%. Again, this was an internal survey. I actually think it's close to 40 to 45%, but our information said 35%. The reason I think it's about 40–45%, this is about average. Colleges, universities across the nation are showing between a 40 to 50% food insecure population on the campus that reside on campus. We've also identified, and again, it's not just here at UIW, but at other college universities, there's also a homeless issue as well, which, you know, all of this is hard to fathom, but this is the reality of what's going on. When you think of, if this is a microcosm of what's taking place in our regular community, well, technically it should be the same thing at a college university, because that's a microcosm of the general population as a whole. It's ironic that the previous Mitch was talking about gardens and sustainability. Our office, as you can see from the name, the Atlin Center for Civic Leadership and Sustainability. So as our name has, we also support community gardens on our campus. And we have a few community gardens off campus. And why do I mention that as part of our food pantry? Well, some of the items in our food pantry that may be best by date or due date or not good as of, what we do is we put them in our composting area for our community garden. So we recycle the items, right? Rather than throw things away and we're creating more havoc than good, we put it into our community gardens and we compost them to create mulch for our, as you were talking about earlier, which is true, we grow our own tomatoes, our jalapenos, we grow kale on campus, and it's open to the campus community or anybody. So if any of y'all happen to be on campus and walking around and go to our community garden and there's a watermelon or there's a tomato and you see it's ripe and ready to go, you can grab it and take it home with you. It is open to everybody and anybody that is part of our campus community. So really, this is Sister Dot, and a few of you probably knew Sister Dot. But Dot was big into making a difference in our global community. And when she was here, we had about 2 or 3 programs. We now have about 35 different programs in the Atlin Center, which is part of, one of them, as mentioned, is our food pantry. We also have global missions. So we actually do global missions. We take students to do missionary work in the Rio Grande Valley, in Mexico, in Peru. We're taking a group to the Dominican Republic this summer. And those mission trips are both in association with either our community gardens, we do health mission, we do education mission trips. I wanted to mention that and show a picture of Sister Dot because I figured a few of you knew Sister. And of course, I know we all miss Sister, but we are still working through her and through her vision here at the work at the university. I also want to note, these are our spring hours for the food pantry. And the food pantry, if you happen to call us, I will be more happy to walk you through it if you want to see it. There were pictures of the food pantry. I'm going to go back up here. At the top right, you can see pictures of the food pantry. And again, we have shelving. It's a pretty good sized room. It's about 10 by 15. We're hoping to get a larger space in the next 18 months because we want to expand it to a clothing closet as well, because we see there is a need for that. I do want to mention that there are times that we also have pet food. What we've noticed is those that are food insecure also have pets. So we make sure we have pet food as well. We also have diapers. We have personal hygiene products. We have socks. So we've expanded the items as we've gotten through. The other thing too, as you read here about awareness, is one thing that we realize we try to advertise as best we possible inside our campus and outside our campus about the food pantry. What we've noticed is sometimes, even to this day, even though the pantry's been open for almost 7-8 years, is still many people on our campus don't know about the pantry. And what I've figured out about it is, and what you can read in this slide here in the middle, is what we've learned is that from the very beginning, this is a private and an emotional time and experience for somebody that is food insecure. So it's not something that is open to the public, and really it's very private. So those people that are food insecure, that need food, it's because there's an immediate need. So they find a resource and they find a need and they find a place to go get it. In essence, those that don't know about it, well, it's because it's out of sight, out of mind. It's not their immediate need or their immediate want for food because they don't have that need. But as I mentioned, we have a very generous campus community. We have between 8,000 to 10,000 pounds of food, canned goods, bread, donated every year by our campus community. So we are very blessed and lucky about that. And we encourage them to continue to give back to the community. And really what I'm here to do is just answer any questions that you may have regarding the food pantry. Again, I appreciate your all's inviting me to come speak to you guys to talk about the food pantry. Unfortunately, we have seen a growing need. I don't know if y'all are aware of, but back in October of last year, the federal government cut back its SNAP and WIC program to where it was giving food stamps at the 2023 financial rate. And in October, they decided, well, COVID's over. We're going to go back and redistribute SNAP and food stamps to the 2019 food pricing, right? And we saw a huge increase in people coming to our food pantry with that slight change, because that was dramatically impacting the amount of money people were getting for their food stamps or WIC. We also noticed again at the beginning of, beginning of December, I got a notification that the SNAP and WIC program was going to change for people over the age of 50. Over the age of 50 who were on WIC or food stamps, if they did not have any children or if they did not have any dependents anymore, they were going to reduce it to just a dependent of one, rather than previously they may have been married, they may have had children, so they were used to that income and that allotment. So that dramatically changed. Plus, they were going to require them to start working. So regardless if you were previously disabled or anything, if you did not qualify to start working, then you would not be able to receive the same amount of WIC or food stamp allotment that you were previously maintaining. Again, we saw an increase in those things. So we work very closely with our friends and partners at the San Antonio Food Bank, at Catholic Charities, at St. Vincent de Paul, because we see the need. And then again, I love working with you all as sisters. Don't get me wrong. Yes, it's great to work with the church and the Catholic priests, but many times it's the sisters getting the work done behind the scenes. So I appreciate the work that all the sisters have been doing, regardless of the order. You all work collectively and with the mindset, one single mindset, to help those in need, regardless of who they are, regardless of their background, their color, their gender, their ethnicity. It's about taking care of our brothers and sisters. And I feel the same way. I recently lost my dad, who fought cancer. He was a Vietnam veteran. I lost him in August. And one thing he would always ask, well, one thing him and mom would always say is, remember that we're not going to take any of this with us. None of this goes with us. We're not going to take any money. We're not going to take our clothes, our car. But they always instilled in me that someday St. Peter and the good Lord's going to be asking us, what do we do to help each other? How do we help our brother and sister? How do we take care of each other's flock? Right? So that's what we try to do here. We have a great staff here that helps. We have a student assistants, so we've ingrained in our student workers to help others. So I think that's also great. And we in this office, even though we do a lot of service and our main focus is to help students do service, we also do community service as a department. So in the fall, we actually went to, I don't know if you're aware of Twin Town Village out in the east side for the homeless. So we've been out there to help them with that. It's a shelter to get people over the age of 50 off the streets and have them in a transitional shelter location on the east side. And they're hoping to build multiples of these. When I was talking to city founders and who are working on this, they mentioned that we need at least 5 of those to address the needs. And then mind you, it supports about 2,000 to 3,000 people at that one location. And they said they need 5 to 7 more of those. So that just tells you of that population over the age of 50 that is unsheltered and food insecure as well. But I think we as a community in San Antonio are doing a lot. We need to do more. And again, it's simple things. As y'all were talking earlier, Judy, you had great questions, Judy, talking about, how can we do composting in our backyard? Or how can we help each other, right? It's simple things that canned goods. Can we donate to canned goods? Can we donate our to-go utensils to somebody because other people need it? If we have plates, we're going to get new plates and utensils because it's the new year and we want to get new plates and utensils. Well, what do you do with the old ones? Do you get those old items to St. Vincent de Paul or Catholic Charities or to Salvation Army? How can we donate those items to make sure people that are in need get those items? So I think what we've learned with COVID is that, not a problem, sister. Thank you for being here. I think what we've learned from COVID is we are truly tied together. and that we need to help support and assist each other. And even though I think with the economy, I honestly believe the economy is going to get better, but I think the prices of food and prices of gas are not going to change, right? Because you have these big businesses who now realize we can charge this amount and we can still make profit, and we're going to continue to do so. I think that's the issue too. And not to mention, you know, just going to buy my wife the other day during the holidays, she wanted eggnog. So I went to go get eggnog, and I was shocked to think it was $5 for a gallon of eggnog. I think that's crazy, right? And I said, okay, I'll buy it this one time, because when are we going to drink eggnog again during the year? But that's not a reality, right? If eggs are $4 or $5 for a dozen of eggs, if milk is the same thing. So I think we just need to be mindful, and we need to be supportive. And we here at the University of the Incarnate Word, we here at the Etling Center are here to support and assist you all. And again, if there's ways that we can collaborate with you all, sisters, regardless of your order, if there's ways that we can help you establish a food pantry, because we've established a food pantry down in the Rio Grande Valley. We go down to Rise of South Texas, and we've helped establish a food pantry down there. So we are more than willing to work with anyone to help build community and partnership. So I will be quiet. I probably finished early, but there may be questions, and if we get done early, we get done early, but we can take an early nap if that's the case. And with this weather, this is good nap and movie weather, but let me know if there's any questions I can answer for anybody here.
Thank you, Dr. González. I'm going to jump in right here and say, I'm sure others will have questions, and we are privileged to have the Sisters of Charity as members of our organization. Sister Letty sent her regrets. She would have been with us today, but on retreat. And so I think we're all just really excited about the extent of this. When I heard food pantry, you know, you think you have a thought, but this is really an extensive service. I just want to make one comment, and then I'm sure others will have questions. You know, what I appreciated when you were talking about, I think you really understand the humanity of these people who are asking for your help. When you say this is a private, emotional experience, and that you honor that, that really touched me. I think that having a certain way of feeling and thinking about these people who are just like us, but in need, is so important. So I really want to thank you for everything you're doing and continue to do. And now I'm sure others will have questions and memories maybe of Sister Dot. So thanks again from SRIC.
Thank you, Anna.
I have a comment, and it's not necessarily about the food pantry as much as food security and food waste. My niece, who is now in her 30s, but when she was in college, noticed that the cafeteria was throwing away food at the end of the day. And so she, it was more than one conversation, but she worked so that at a certain time, they would reduce the prices so that the students who couldn't afford the meal prices could afford the reduced prices at her school. So I don't know if that's still going on, but I mean, that's another innovative way that people are addressing it.
So different universities do different things. So that's a great idea. One thing that we've done, two things with our food services here on campus. One, we've worked with them as part of our composting. So back to the items of, let's say they're chopping fruits and vegetables and they have the ends of the fruits and vegetables and they get rid of them. Well, again, we're collecting them to put them in our compost. So again, we're trying to be mindful of how we waste items. The other thing too is we work with them to gather meal swipes. So now at the universities, students with their ID cards, they just swipe in and swipe out to get food. So what we've done is they've offered a certain amount of food swipes per week for students to get for free. So those students that may not have a meal plan, or those students that cannot afford certain meals or run out of meals, there's an allotment of meal swipes, just like you're talking about, Cecilia, or Seal, right? That students can get food even though they may not be able to afford it or they may not have access. We need to make sure that they have access to that. And again, our food pantry, what's great about the San Antonio Food Bank that you may not be aware of is that sometimes we'll get an email or a phone call from them and say, hey, today we have steaks, come get steaks, or today we have eggs, or today we have ham. So they will contact us and say, it's first come, first serve. The people that come get it, come get it. Once we get it, we just try to get it distributed on campus. About a few months ago, we were working with them. We had a huge program on campus, and I came to the thought and idea of saying, hey, we're going to have about 800 to 1,000 students on campus for this particular event. Can we get a pallet of fruits and vegetables? And they said, we would love to deliver. So they brought a whole pallet of fruits and vegetables. We got that whole pallet out in a matter of 2.5 hours to all of our students, faculty, and staff on campus. So you're right, Seal. We need to come up with more innovative and creative ways that really engage our students and really listening to our students. And I appreciate what Anna asked. One thing we learned too, Anna, not just the fact that it's private, well, very much that it's private. So at one point we had a mini pantry inside our office here at UIW. So we have 2 locations realistically. Well, because I was going to get a new staff member where we had that pantry, I needed to fix it up for the staff member and move the pantry out to another location. Well, I had this ingenious idea to move it to the front of the office. Well, I thought that was smart. In reality, that was not smart. We saw a huge dip in people participating in the pantry because it was open and anybody could see. And I was like, dumb Rick, here, let's think, Rick, you may be a doctor, but sometimes the doctor doesn't work through here. So again, we realized, you know what, it is a private, we know better. This is a private event. We moved it to a third floor location that we got. And again, our numbers increased back again. The other thing too, I think, Anna, what we've learned is building relationships. It's not just about the pantry, it's getting to know our customers and getting to know them as individual people. We've been able to write grants as well. I write a lot of grants, and we were able to write a grant with HEB. So HEB has been kind enough and generous enough to give us HEB gift cards. So we have a lot of canned goods and dry goods, but we do have a refrigerator, but we don't have milk. We don't have orange juice. We don't have chicken or meat. But we are able to find in those people that are in need, that are in real need and need proteins, we will give them gift cards. And we just don't give them out to everybody. We're very particular of what we do. But again, Anna, it's like you said, we build a relationship. We get to know who they are and what their needs are. And we make sure that we support them. We also have, like I said, a great partnership with St. Vincent de Paul. And once we build our relationships with our friends, because they are our friends and they are family now, many times we learn that they can't afford rent or they have an electricity bill that's too big. So that's when we partner with our friends at St. Vincent de Paul. And St. Vincent de Paul does have funds and has a process that they can pay for rent, electricity, things of that nature. So Anna, you hit it right on the head. It's about relationships. It's about getting to know our brothers and sisters and making them know that they are individuals. This is not about a group thing, and this is not about a large mass. This is about Esther. This is about Judy. This is about Patricia. This is about Ruben. Everybody has different needs, and it's making sure that we address your specific needs and make you feel that we are here for you. I can think of a story. I have one particular single dad that comes in every Friday with his 4 boys, and they come get food for the weekend. And we've now expanded to where we will get books and we'll get toys, and we'll get and the boys will come in here and they'll be excited, and they know that they can get a book or a toy when they come shopping, right? And again, it's making them understand that we want this to make this a positive experience, not a negative experience. And the last thing I will say, I'll open up more questions. Anna, I'm hoping within the next 12 months, I'm hoping to make this curbside like HEB, to where somebody can order online, order their foods online, go to we have visitor parking at the front of the campus, go there, give us the time slot, and we will walk up to them and give it to them to their car, just like you would at HEB, and continue that private, discreet environment for them. Because again, for us, it's about serving them and serving each other. So I'm hoping within the next 18 months to get that off the ground and make it work, because I think that's a need in our community as well.
I've just got to say, having been a recent customer of using curbside, that is a great idea. I hope you can make that happen, at least at some level, because today people have to, you really do have to work with their ways of accessing as well, the ease of accessing the food. So that's a great idea. Thanks. So other questions?
I've got a question. It's amazing what you're doing, but it seemed like you were saying that there are faculty and staff at Incarnate Word who are food insecure.
That would be the case at all universities, Judy, not just here at UIW. UTSA has the same thing. I have my oldest son is at A&M College Station, the same thing. So it's across the board, right?
Mhm.
The unfortunate part about it is sometimes it's the way let me say an example, right? So for example, I get paid once a month. And for some people that can be difficult, right? To get paid once a month and make sure that that allotment gets all the way to the end of the month. Well, sometimes some universities, and I've worked at UTSA, I've worked at Our Lady of Lake. When I was at Our Lady of Lake would pay me for Christmas time, they would pay me early before Christmas. So my monthly wage for January, they would distribute it to me like December the 20th, thinking that, okay, we're going to pay him early for January, so he has extra money for Christmas. Well, that's great. But what happens come January when my allotment of money is now half of what I have, and now I'm halfway through the month and all my money's gone, right? So even though as a university or as a mindset, you're thinking, oh, it's a great idea, we're going to give them their money early. So yeah, but if I don't have a budget, if I'm not judicious about how my financial, so yeah, it can be precarious. The other thing too, I think there's a misperception of how people are paid at universities. If you were to go nationwide, most people at universities probably get paid between 35 to 65,000 a year. And although that is a good steady income, teachers get paid more than people at universities many times, right? So, it's trying to find that balance, Judy. And again, sometimes you have adjunct faculty, right, who are not full-time faculty. So they could be an adjunct here at UIW, they could be an adjunct at Palo Alto, they could be an adjunct in San Antonio College, trying to piecemeal a full-time salary. But again, they're getting a portion of their check taken away at each of those institutions. So, yeah, it is a reality. Again, I'm not trying to sugarcoat things, but I'm also trying to be realistic and saying it's not just a UIW thing, it's a college university thing all over the nation. And I think the other thing too is as salaries have increased sometimes, right? So now you hear that some places are giving $15 to $18 to $20 an hour. I believe across the street at Bill Miller's, they're paying $15 an hour. And you're saying, well, that's great. Well, yeah, but the cost of bread has gone up also. The cost of everything has gone up. So even though you may be getting a larger salary, that has gone up. The other thing too, Judy, that I will say is the increase in insurance, health insurance. So
Yes.
most people at universities, again, I've been at higher ed for 25 years, so I have a little bit of knowledge here. So most people at college universities, we may get an annual pay increase of 2 to 4%. So 2 to 4% may sound like a lot, but when our health insurance increases by 8 to 15% per year, that 2 to 4% really doesn't do anything, right?
Yep.
So one thing as a nation, and my wife is a real doctor. I'm a doctor of education. My wife is a real doctor. She's a pediatric doctor, and she works for Christus Health, ironically. So she is part of the Sisters of Charity as well. But she herself will say that the increase is insurance, right? The middleman is really increasing the cost of healthcare. These insurance companies who don't have anything to do with the actual healthcare are the ones dictating the prices. So that is where we're seeing a huge increase. And as we age, and what we're seeing right now is we have one of the largest populations of those over the age of 40 at any time of the history of the United States. So again, that's why you're seeing a huge increase in healthcare, because so many people are accessing it. So Judy, your question is right on point, but there are so many other issues going along with unemployment, with employment, with cost of living, with cost of food, with health insurance. All these compounded are then having people being food insecure and some people not being able to afford their rent. So there are so many, and San Antonio is one of the most has the least amount of affordable housing in the nation. It's one of the highest, right? So for a city which has a large population of low-income people, we are one of the fewest cities that have the most affordable. Think of downtown San Antonio nowadays. Downtown San Antonio has so many new condominiums and places that are unaffordable for people that used to live in those areas. So Judy, I appreciate your question. And again, we will do our best to continue to support and help everybody and anybody. Any other questions?
I got a question here is, I'm so proud of the program on the Sister Dot. I work for Sister Church in Conway for 25 years. So, I mean, I'm very proud of them, to honor her. But another thing, I have a question. It's not you, but you did a wonderful job. But looking forward for this summer, the state funding cut the school meal for the student. I mean, I don't know how we can work together to solve the problem. At least feed, the hungry child, during the summertime. So I hope you all can work together with the city or whatever agency.
So Esther, that's a good question. I think one of the issues that we have in San Antonio is that we have 17 school districts, right? So
The
unlike
tax base.
yeah, there you go. Well, that's one thing. The other thing too is you have 17 different superintendents, different systems, different schools. Unlike in Houston, Houston has HISD, Dallas has Dallas ISD, Austin has Austin ISD, El Paso does have 2, but we have 17, right? So it's trying to identify and working. So you're right, Esther, we're going to have to work with all the school districts. And then what we need to do as institutions of higher education is work collectively and together. So it's not just a UIW issue, it's a UIW, UTSA, Incarnate Word, Our Lady of the Lake, St. Mary's, A&M San Antonio. How can we work together to work with the school districts to offset this? Because you're right, the San Antonio Food Bank is going to be hit hard, but how can we offset that at our locations? Because again, for them to distribute 20, 30,000 people at one time, that's great, but it's a one-time deal. And how often can they do that?
That's
Whereas
right.
when you're talking a daily meal, many of these young people go to school because that's the only meal they're going to get
That's right.
for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And
I
many,
think Esther's talking about that our state of Texas did not take the federal
no,
funds.
correct. No,
Yeah.
you're right.
Yeah.
So I get what she's saying, because
Yeah.
we need to start planning now for the summer. I get what Esther's saying. You're exactly right.
Yeah.
But if we don't start planning now for the summer, here
It's
we're going to have
work.
thousands of children and their families trying to figure out where are we going to find food in the summer. And the other part to that, Susan and Esther, is most people think that the universities are closed in the summer. Well, I'm still open. I still work here, right? Because I'm part of student services. And even though the students are gone, I work 24/7, 365, just about. By the way, our pantry is open by appointment. We do it on the weekends. If there's an emergency, I open it. Luckily, I live an hour away from campus, a mile, not an hour, a mile away from campus, so I can get back to campus to support a need. But you're right, Susan and Esther, if we don't address that need now, there's going to be a huge crisis in the summer, right? So what we need to do, and that's why what we've done here in this office is we listen to what's going on in the community. Once we knew about the SNAP reduction, once we knew about the changes, we started ramping up services here because I could forecast what's going to happen, and sure enough, it's going to happen. So as Esther's talking and you're talking, Susan, it's unfortunate that the state of Texas, and the politics is politics, and it's unfortunate because it's the children and the people that are hurt and harmed by politics. But besides that, we need to push that to a side and understand that these are people and humans, and back to human dignity, and we need to take care of each other. So I appreciate you bringing that up, Esther. I wrote a note to myself so we can maybe reach out to our friends at the school districts and see what we can put in place to make sure that we can do. The other hard part, though, about that, Esther, is many of the, and it doesn't matter if it's north side or northeast or south side, it doesn't matter. People send their children to neighborhood schools, right? And many times it's also a transportation issue. So even though we can figure something out, transportation is still going to be an issue, right? So I can say I'm here at UIW and I have food. Well, that's great, Rick, but I can't get to UIW to go get the food, right? So it's also a transportation issue, So that's why Judy's point is well taken, but there's so many compounded issues on that, right? Not a lot of people don't realize that, well, I do realize some of our students, it takes them 2.5 to 3 hours to get to campus from the south side because they have to take multiple buses. So
Yeah.
mind you, it's going to take them 2.5 to 3 hours just to get to campus, and then 2.5 hours or 3 hours to get back. Well, that's 6 hours of time that a normal person who had transportation would take 15 minutes.
Yep.
But because they have to get on a bus, get off a bus, get on a bus, get off a bus, change the. So we need to, you know, transportation is another huge issue as a city that we need to figure out, right? And light rail, we've talked about light rail, we've talked about so many different things, but we need to stop talking and start doing. And I'll be honest and
Yeah, we need to-
transparent. I'll be honest and transparent with you. When I came on board a few years ago, they were telling me that this issue of a food pantry had been a discussion for 10 years prior to when I got here. And I was like, I don't have 10 years. We need to do it now because people are hungry now. So I said, as people want to continue discussing, let's get this up and running because we need to help people now. And we can't wait 3 months, 6 months, 9 months because people are going hungry during that time frame. So something we need to do collectively, and that's what we try to teach our students here at UIW. We try to teach them about the social injustices. And right now there's so many injustices that are going on when it's talking about food insecurity, many of our people who are unsheltered or unaffordable housing, the cost of education, gun violence, immigration. I can go on. There's so many things that are happening simultaneously.
Yes.
And when it was us in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, it was only one of those issues happening per decade. Well, now they're all happening at the same time. So it's trying to identify how can we do things. And just like Mitch was talking about earlier, right? We're talking about community gardens, but we're also talking about climate change, right? Why are we getting these cold snaps now every year? I don't, as a child from who's lived and raised in Texas, I don't remember it being this cold for this many times in a short amount of time frame, right? So our hots are going to get hotter, our rain's going to get rainier, and our cold is going to get colder, but we need to be better prepared to support those needs. And again, one thing that we're going to start doing also, and Anna, I've thought about this before, but we're going to also start working on having blanket donations to our pantry as well, and getting those turned down to the. We actually had a partner contact us. Ironically, last Thursday, they were driving in from out of town, and they were already partnering with us, and they had a truckload full of blankets. We redirected it to the Immigration Migration Center in San Antonio here, so that they can help those people in need more than, you know, we knew our campus was going to be shut down and our students weren't even on our campus yet. So I said, no, we don't need it. We need other people to get it. So again, it's partnering, knowing who our partners are and knowing how we can make those contacts. So as you all, the last thing I'll share my screen, I'm going to make sure that you all have my contact information on here. If you guys, if you all need anything, there's my email. Yeah, there you go, my email and my phone number. If you all need anything at all, or if you all want to donate, or if you all know of people that are in need or are food insecure, or if you are know of a partner out there that doesn't know how to create a food pantry, by all means, do not hesitate to give them my number. Do not hesitate to pass my information along. We are here to help support and assist any member of our community. And our definition of community here at UIW and here in this office, because of Sister Dot, is a global community. We are here to serve everyone and anyone across the world. So thank you for that.
And just one thing that I would add to what you're saying is, you know, like I think because our organization is regional, as you see, we've had, you know, different people on from different cities today. You know, like, and I know we don't have time to talk about it today, but like, how else can we put pressure on our state government to be able to either allocate funds or to show the need so that they don't do this again? You know, so to me, it's really imperative, because you're talking about one area, and, you know, Texas is huge, and this is going to be a really big problem for us. We're one of just a few states that didn't accept those funds. And like you said, it's always children that, you know, get the brunt of it. So anyway, but, you know, I just want to add that to our ideas, like what we're going to be
question,
able to.
Susan.
to talk about, I know we don't have time to talk about it today.
I'm going to do this in 2 minutes.
Okay.
So our office also oversees voter registration on campus. So my suggestion would be is actually do the voter registration. We need to teach young people. We need to get young people involved and engaged and understand the issues, right? Because they are the future. And we need to have them. What I've learned about young people is they are big in climate change. They're big in sustainability. But what we need to do is we need to get them emotionally connected. So what you're saying is they may not understand food insecurity, so we need to teach them about food insecurity. We need to teach them that people are hungry and why are people hungry. But if we can engage them, the pressure is going to be put at the voting box, to be honest with you. At least that's what I see. So if we can encourage people to vote, register to vote, and understand the issues in their local community, because you're right, Susan, all of these are different. They're the same, but they're different in each community. But if we can encourage people, because you all go vote. It's the young people that don't go vote. And we need to encourage them why and give them reasons to go vote. So yeah, we register about 500 to 800 students every 2 years here at UIW as part of our office. So we're about to ramp that up again for the presidential year this year. So we do that every year. And we're fortunate. So like I said, we do about 35 different programs. If you, I'm going to put in the chat real quick. If y'all ever get bored, I'm going to put UIW. You can go visit our website with the Etling Center.
Yeah.
And you can see all the other programs that we do. And I'm open to partnering up with other universities. So Susan, where are you at, Susan?
I'm here in San Antonio. Our monastery is in Bernie.
Perfect. So again, we partner with all the other universities in San Antonio, but let's say one of you is out in El Paso or somebody's out in Austin. I'm willing to partner with our other college universities at other places to see how we can better work together and serve each other. So on our website has many of our programs. One of the pages on the website has our annual report. And I'm about to publish our next one for this past year. But you can see all the work and programs and services that we do. And again, there might be something that you say, hey, I wonder if my other college university is doing something similar, or if Dr. Rick can go work with them and see what we can do together. Because again, it's about building partnerships and collaborations. But thank you again, Anna, for this opportunity. If you see something on our website that you say, hey, I want Dr. Rick to come back and talk to us about this other thing, I would be more than happy to do so. But I want to thank each and every one of you all for the work that you all do in your respective communities. Because again, like I said, this is all about taking care of each other. And we are each other's keepers, both brothers and sisters together.
Oh, thank you so much. We are so privileged to have you join us. Again, the way this turned out, I think really approaches all our work to really work in a global community. We will be sharing, I just wanted you to know, of course, we will be sharing your information. We have members, as Susan pointed out, in Washington, D.C., all really outside, and a lot of them are not able to be local. So we're going to be sharing a recording and this information with our full membership. Just wanted you to know that. But thanks again.
Thank you. Y'all have a great day. God bless.
Thanks, Dr. González.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, moving on. The first item that we need to do now is the approval of the minutes of the November 2023